Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Danny Plauger, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Virginia Transit Association. I want to welcome everybody to the second VTA and DRPT Lunch and Learn virtual webinar series. VTA is incredibly excited about this partnership and opportunity to offer our members and the Commonwealth's transit community a deeper dive into the planning challenges, issues, and processes with insight from the experts at DRPT. This series would not be possible without the support and expertise of DRPT, especially Bethel and Alan. We are proud to have the award-winning DRPT team as our partners on this webinar series. And DRPT has racked up quite a few awards recently. The American Council on Engineering has given them the National Recognition Award for the Equity and Modernization Study. APTA has given them the Best Marketing and Communications for social media for the Virginia Breeze. And the Virginia Association of Mapping and Land Information Services has given them the 2023 first place recognition for the rail map, which has a special place in my heart. I highlighted these awards because this webinar series is just another example of DRPT and VTA thinking outside the box to take the best practices from the pages of reports and bring them right to your desktop, hopefully in an interactive and effective manner. Today's presentation is reviewing the transit facility construction project, delivery, and development process. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the Q&A box and ask them at the appropriate time. One last bit of housekeeping. Registration for VTA's 2023 conference is now open and nearly sold out. And so if you have not already registered for our upcoming conference in Virginia Beach, please do so ASAP. Now this afternoon, I have the pleasure of introducing our partners in this webinar series and today's presenters. Bethel supports DRPT's Northern Virginia office in Alexandria. She's a graduate of UVA and licensed professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Bethel began her career at VDOT and since joining DRPT in 2022, in addition to supporting many of Virginia's largest transit facility engineering and construction projects, Bethel administers DRPT's GIS-based construction project program management portal and is an accomplished project manager, a smart scale guru, and is now focusing on the low-no emissions infrastructure, including electrical vehicle charging infrastructure across the state. Alan manages DRPT's statewide engineering program. He is a graduate of VMI and has had over a 30-year career in both public and private sectors, working with structural engineers and transportation construction projects. Prior to joining DRPT, Alan also worked at VDOT, providing leadership as the Assistant State Construction Engineer and as well as the Louisa Engineering Residency Engineer. He is an experience at providing excellent customer service to local partners and stakeholders, and in his current role, has been assisting the progression of projects from feasibility to construction. Alan has also been working very closely with GGS and VDOT to streamline the transit shelter policies and procedures to support the goals of each transit agency. So please grab your lunch, sit back, and enjoy a great program from Alan and Bethel today. Thank you. Alan, I'm turning it over to you.
All right, thank you, Danny. I appreciate the introduction. I think you can go up at like a couple slides. Okay. Yes, this one. Yeah. So we just want to reiterate like what we shared at our last meeting, that we really appreciate this partnership because it gives Alan and I an opportunity to share with this community the ways that DRPT can support you as you promote and pursue the different engineering and construction projects and programs you have. And as the engineering team, Alan and I can like be here to provide outreach and oversight and support on every aspect of transit capital construction project development and delivery. And so we hope that these webinars moving forward are going to highlight like the different aspects of a construction project and be informative to you all. Go to the next slide.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for your lunch. We are going to hit a lot of information today, and if there is something specific that you want to follow up on, whether it's a specific topic that we've discussed today, please contact us, or if there's another topic that you would like us to take a deeper dive on, please reach out to Danny and let him know what your needs are, and we'll do our best to accommodate it. Today, this series, we're going to talk about project development and delivery. On June the 23rd, cost estimates have been a huge focus on our construction projects, especially post-pandemic. So much has changed in the industry, and we're focusing on making sure that everyone's cost estimates for their construction projects, whether they're delivering them next year or in 5 years, is a reasonable estimate for funding and advancement. So we're going to take a real deep dive on June the 23rd and talk about cost estimates and cost estimation practices in detail. August 25th, we get a lot of questions about design build, design bid build, progressive design build, construction manager at risk. So August the 25th, we're going to take some time and review project delivery methods and some of the nuances between them and merits of each. Also, during the design phase, value engineering is critical to make sure that the project meets the goals and needs for the transit agency. So we're going to take, on October 27th, we're planning to take a dive into value engineering. And then on December, as we get towards Christmas, we're going to talk about lead and sustainability. We also get a lot of questions about that. So that was a proposed topic in December. All right.
All right, so Danny already introduced us, but just to reiterate, like currently the engineering team is Alan and I, and as well as our consultant bench, which is STV, WSP, and HDR. And so Alan works out of the Richmond office and supports our local partners pretty much south of Fredericksburg, and I work out of the Alexandria office and support the northern partners. And so we work together and support each other as well to provide consistency and oversight just to DRPT's overall engineering and construction program. And so like we are here to support the local agencies throughout the entire life cycle, including feasibility, NEPA evaluation, developing your RFP, scoping and design, construction administration, all of that. And we can support with like reviewing design submittals, attending progress meetings, site visits, all of that, whatever you need to help move a project forward to the next stage, we are here to help. And so please reach out to us at any point so that we know the best ways that we can support your team as you progress through projects.
All right, transit facility construction project development delivery. And when we reference development and delivery, in a very simple sense, we can talk about design and construction. But development and delivery covers everything from when you begin planning for your project all the way through to completion and commissioning. Commissioning is often an oversight, but we need to start with the end in mind, and we need to begin thinking about how you're going to use this facility, what its goals and needs are when you're in the planning stage. Throughout the presentation, we'll be referencing principles and practices from FTA's Construction Project Management Handbook. For those of you with a PMP or a CCM, a project management professional, or a certified construction manager certification, many of these practices that we reference will sound familiar. They apply to any construction project regardless of funding. So the FTA has some great resources. Some of you may not leverage FTA funds for your construction project, but it's still some really great content that they share online, very easy to access. I think two key takeaways for today's Lunch and Learn is that planning is critical. Do not wait until you need a facility improvement project to begin planning for it. Do not wait until it's met its useful life to begin planning for it. Many of you have projects that may be lingering in between these nether regions, between feasibility and development and design, between design and construction. And for those in between phases, they're just as important as the others because they're holding up the next step, especially making sure that the estimate and the schedules are updated very frequently at each of those stages. And the second takeaway is really that DRPT is here to help. And we appreciate that many of you may not have in-house engineering staff. And Director DeBrule has charged us with supporting you, your efforts to develop and deliver these transit construction projects. So please don't hesitate to contact us anytime to reinforce what Bethla said with a need that you may have. Okay.
All right. So like Alan mentioned, there are several resources available like FTA's Construction Project Management Handbook. And even those of you who don't receive like Chapter 53 funds, for instance, can still use it as a reference because a lot of the same principles apply no matter what kind of project you're working on or where you've gotten your funding from. There are also a lot of other training programs and classes that you can attend, like what's linked here, this virtual training to a Rutgers project management class. You can also become a certified project manager through the Project Management Institute or a certified construction manager. And there are a lot of other programs offered through Google or Harvard or more that you can find online. And then, of course, like one of the greatest resources that we have is each other. And so many of you have active construction projects. And as a community, we can lean on each other to share lessons learned and best practices across the state. And so through things like this, we can learn who's pursuing different like LEED certifications, who's installing EV infrastructure, like how could you present your project to your board or council? Like how is someone staging construction that you could also do, and just use each other as resources. And so we did want to touch on that because I think that we are a great resource to each other, and as a state, we can support each other through these projects as well.
All right, construction project goals. We frequently talk about safety, and FTA defines safety and security a certain way. But when we do begin planning for a capital project improvement or a renovation or a new facility, take a look back over your shoulder and think about those circumstances in your career where you have felt unsafe, where it's in your operations and maintenance of your fleet, or entering and exiting the parking lot, an element or a feature of your current building, injuries that have been reported by your employees or contractors. Think about safety from the very beginning of your project and begin with that as a focus. And it should drive the design, and even during construction. Unless you have a brand new facility on a brand new site, you're going to have to sort of live with, I frequently say that for those of you who have ever renovated a kitchen, you got to eat in your construction project, and you got to live in there. And many of you will have to come to work every day, park, navigate vehicles in and out of a active construction project. And it's going to be very dangerous for you, your employees, and the contractor staff. So your operations during construction and then planning to keep your staff safe should be a major focus of your construction project from the very beginning. You want to make sure that you comply with all applicable requirements, whether it's FTA or state, and there are a bunch of them. And there are many smart people out there who know what those are, whether it's environmental or something on the security side or network connectivity. Making sure that you comply with all applicable requirements is critical. And defining them up front before you get started is also. I recommend that you create a charter. And a charter is something that is promoted by PMP and the project management body of knowledge. And it's a great tool to document and think through your project goals when you're getting started. Develop a rough schedule, a rough cost estimate. What resources am I going to need for this project? You can't just hatch them. They need to be skilled project management and delivery resources. And if you don't have them, you need a plan to get them before you get started on your project. A charter is also another great tool once you've developed it to share with your agency leadership for buy-in, with your boards, with your town councils. There are a lot of great templates on the internet, and we can also help facilitate a workshop with your project team to develop and focus on this charter. So that, to me, it's a very critical step that's often neglected up front. The resources that all of us have these days are very dynamic. People continue to move onward and upward. We see a lot of retirements, and people are moving from agency to agency, and creating that charter and a framework to be able to efficiently pass the torch from one person to another is really critical. Sustainability is something I always want to touch on. It's sort of a lead squishy topic, but making sure that your facility is going to be maintainable and sustainable over time, that you don't include a lot of elements that are going to be expensive to maintain and replace, Think about who's going to use your facility, who's going to change the light bulbs, and get those folks engaged early in your project to identify what is sustainable and what is not. Your facility certainly needs to be a reflection of your commitment to transit. Many of you may only deliver one construction project in your entire career, so you certainly want to do your best to develop a facility that future generations will enjoy, they'll utilize to meet the agency's needs and goals. And then we always talk about on schedule, within budget, and high quality. Those three things are sort of the legs of the stool, but safety is the first step that we need to take. Okay, Bethel.
All right, so a project is conceived through your organization's strategic planning process, and it's documented through a CIP. And so based on the needs of your community, you and your locality will identify a project, and then we'll need to develop a scope of work to do one or more of these things listed: to sustain a service, improve the quality of a service, expand it. Maybe you need to comply with some regulatory requirements that you haven't been. And so you would create the scope of work that should also include the projected full cost of the project, as well as a stage funding plan. Like, those things need to go in your CIP. And so starting from buying a parcel to the architecture and engineering design that you need to do, construction, and then also the cost of a construction manager, which is something that we'll touch on later. But once your transit agency, your locality have identified what your need is, what the scope of work is that is going to meet that need, then you can move on to the next stage, which is feasibility.
All right, so for this stage, performing a feasibility study is critical. And I'm going to phone a friend here and reach out to Grant Sparks, or DRPT, a transit planner, and take a minute to talk about feasibility studies and how you can engage DRPT to support you to really begin thinking about your project. And some of you have developed projects on your own and you have 100% plans, but DRPT has resources to help you gauge the viability of parcels. What type of facility do you need? Begin doing a little industrial engineering, thinking about how you're going to use this facility and how it needs to be designed, what resources you're going to need to deliver the project, what permits are required, how you develop your strategic plan, and really some conceptual engineering sufficient for you to be able to develop a good schedule and cost estimate. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute and reach out. And Grant, can you help us out here and talk about feasibility a little bit and why it's so important? How they can deliver it.
Sure. Thanks, Alan. And I guess I just want to stress the last bullet point here on this slide, that not one size fits all when it comes to a feasibility study. Every project is different. Every transit agency is different. And so feasibility studies just will look different in general, and they will have different elements. So as you get to the point where you think that you are ready to start putting together a feasibility study, we would certainly recommend that you reach out to us, and we can certainly help you think through what your needs are and what the scope of work would look like for your particular project. And you can either reach out to me directly. I am the director of transit planning for DRPT, but you could also reach out to Bethel, Alan, or any of your DRPT program managers that you work with on a day-to-day basis. So just a conversation to kind of get things started is always very helpful. In terms of the resources available or funding available for a feasibility study, almost always these involve consultants or teams of consultants to help you put together your study. DRPT does offer some funding assistance. Most of you are probably familiar with our technical assistance program, which we offer during our normal grant cycle. That is a 50-50 match program. So DRPT will kick in up to 50% of the cost of the study or the plan, whatever it is. And it is up to the agency to then fill out that remaining 50%. I will caveat that by saying it does not always have to be local match. State code does require a local match, so there has to be some degree of local share within that 50%, but that does not prohibit agencies from leveraging some federal funding that they have available to them. Additionally, for transit agencies that operate in urbanized areas, another resource would be your MPOs. DRPT does administer FTA 5303 funding. So that's planning money that goes to the MPOs. And transit planning is an eligible expense. So please coordinate with your MPOs as well and reach out to them as you start thinking through your feasibility study needs, because they may have some funding that you can access for that. And then, of course, FTA also does provide a number of discretionary grant programs. Sometimes they involve planning as an eligible expense. So you can also keep an eye out for those types of programs. But again, we just ask that you reach out to us if you have any questions, because we can kind of help you think through what's the appropriate program based on your specific needs. And sorry, that was a lot. Alan, Bethel, I will turn it back over to you guys.
Great. Thank you, Grant, very much. There is the key takeaway there is reach out early and engage, and performing feasibility can help identify so many things about your project. And we're grateful to have that as a resource that we can extend to you. Thank you, Grant, very much. All right, next slide.
Okay, so for any project, the project manager is going to have to make sure that you consider the environmental impacts and apply any mitigation measures necessary on that project. And so if it's federally funded, then that consideration has to be in compliance with NEPA. And in those cases, FTA is really helpful. The regional office can assist and can provide a checklist of all the things that you need to evaluate to determine what the significance of potential impacts are on the project and whether or not the project is exempt from like a further review, or if it is going to have to, or if you're going to have to perform a detailed environmental study. And even if there isn't any federal funding, the project is still going to have to comply with Virginia DEQ requirements like the erosion sediment control and stormwater management guidelines. And in some cases, like you would probably know for yourselves whether or not your locality administers a Virginia stormwater management program yourselves instead of DEQ. And in those cases, like stormwater management plans, construction general permit registration, permit modifications, all of those things would be submitted to and reviewed by that VSMP authority in your locality. But if the program isn't administered by your locality, then DEQ would be the one who's in charge of administering your permit coverage. And so we really recommend that even at the level of acquiring a parcel, that you still do due diligence and perform enough of a design and engineering to ensure that when you consider even the environmental requirements that you need to meet, that the parcel that you're looking at is still viable for use on your project. And then we've got some other things listed here, like to consider at the bottom. NHPA, that's the National Historic Preservation Act. NADHR, that's the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. And then VCRIS, that's the Department of Historical Resources electronic GIS database that houses the locations and the types of the cultural resources across the state. And so those are also things, along with erosion sediment control, your stormwater pollution prevention plan, that need to be taken into consideration when you are evaluating a location for a project.
Okay, project management plan. I cannot emphasize enough how important a project management plan is. And even before you know a lot of details of the project, you can start with a P&P, beginning with the end in mind: commissioning, operations, making sure your facility is safe for your employees. Start with those thoughts as the project development and delivery becomes into fruition, when you're even at feasibility or before. We see a lot of projects that are stuck between phases, between feasibility and design and construction. Starting with a plan and make sure your plan is resourced with skills resources necessary to deliver your project is key, or it's going to get stuck somewhere. We've developed over the past many months on your construction projects that we've been supporting and participating in, and based on FTA's project management template, we're creating a template that includes everything from feasibility, permitting, things to consider when you're developing your construction documents, developing an RFP for professional services, step by step by step by step. It's we'll bust through these slides, but for me, the most important part of your project is to make sure that from the very beginning, you have a project management plan. It's a fluid plan. It's a living document. It will grow and evolve as your project advances, but making sure that you do have a plan, that you've got a great org chart from the very beginning with skilled resources to manage your construction project, knowing that along the way, you may begin a project and somebody else is going to have to pick the ball up behind you and finish it. All right, Danny, next slide. I touched on safety and security management, always put that at the top. FTA defines that in a certain way, but making sure that your employees are safe, that you think about safety both for your team during operations and maintenance and during construction is critical. You need to consider that from the very beginning, and it will drive your design and construction. Having a QA plan. The contractor in most instances during construction, and then your professional services consultant, they're responsible for quality control. But you need to perform quality assurance. And if you're not a skilled professional in reviewing construction documents or design plans or monitoring construction activities, then find those resources. There are a lot of great resources out in the industry. Change management. Something's going to change. That's the one thing that you can count on. Somebody needs to approve it. Who is it going to be? Make sure that you determine up front when there is a change, who has the authority to approve a change, whether it's a change in the scope of the design, an extension of the design contract for your architect, a change during construction. Third-party agreements. Third-party agreements are critical to begin thinking about upfront in your P&P. Many of you are going to require a utility relocation. If you're developing EV infrastructure, you need to begin coordinating with your utility company, in some cases, years in advance before your construction project, just to get the improvements necessary in front of the meter before you can even begin building your project. Owner-supplied materials. There's so many things that the contractor is not going to provide, whether it's a fuel pump or a server for your computer and network system. You are going to provide materials that the contractor is going to need to install for their project. You have to have separate procurements for those. Your project management plan really needs to consider what you're going to do and what materials you're going to provide. If you are working in a separate place during construction, they might not move your chair or your desk or your computer. You need to have a plan in place for that. Project controls also is critical. You're not going to have this right out of the gate, but you need to think about a management information system. Where am I going to store all this stuff so that I can pass the torch to the next person in line? Who's going to update the cost estimates and make sure that the budgets are aligned with those and monitor expenditures through the life of the project? Who's going to develop my schedule, my project management plan, and manage that for me? Who's going to do that? And then starting a risk register. Projects have a lot of risks. There are also opportunities. So making sure that those risks are documented somewhere and you have a mitigation plan for each is critical. Okay, Danny. This slide, I know it's busy. I know you can't see it. This is page 1 of 3. So we have invested a lot of time in coming up with a P&P template. Many of these activities in the template might not apply for your project, but it's very inclusive. And we will take the time when you're considering a construction project and walk through this step by step by step to identify what resources you may need, how it fits your project, and how DRPT can help you deliver it. Okay, Danny.
All right, so Alan mentioned risk register earlier. So risks are inevitable on any project. Every project is going to have them, but some of them you can turn into opportunities if you identify them early enough. So on the right is a little example of a risk register where you can rate each risk based on how likely it is to happen and how large of an impact it would be to the project. And DRPT does have a template of a risk register that we can share with you. If you'd like to use it, just reach out. And what it does is allow you to identify all of your risks and then track and mitigate them throughout the course of a project. And as you and your team review them regularly, you'll be able to identify solutions and opportunities to diminish those risks. So you can track things like he mentioned, utility improvements and relocations, third-party agreements that you need, like MOT constraints that you might have during construction, like weather sensitive activities, material lead times, potential presence of unsuitable soils, all sorts of stuff. And the better that you're able to identify all of the things that you know are risks, the less contingency that you'll need to have in your budget and in your schedule. And then also, as you develop the habit of maintaining a risk register over time, you'll be able to use those lessons learned on future projects and then make your program much more effective long term.
And professional services. For those of you who are not resourced with teams of engineers and project managers, the industry has them for you, and there's some great ones out there. So take the time when you are developing your project management plan and considering a project, think about the resources that you'll need, and in between the phases, having a project manager, a construction manager there to get you from one step to the next and to manage your project for you. Making sure that you meet, if it is FTA funded, all of the qualifications-based procurements for the selection of an AE firm is critical. The NR TAP tool is something that Fiona Rhodes had showed with Blacksburg Transit, had shared with me, and we have evaluated that. It's a great tool to help you develop your RFP if you do not have procurement folks, but that's a great tool as well. Professional services are out there, and we recommend that you engage them early for any steps that you'll need on your project, and making sure that you have them, that they're considered in your cost estimate, and then you can step back and do your daily job while they do the other work for you to advance your project. Okay, Dean.
So Alan already mentioned the benefits of creating a charter. It's not listed here, but there's a project management body of knowledge guide, and it lists the different things that you should include in a charter for it to be effective. And so it's like requirements of the project, the business needs it meets, a summary schedule, the assumptions and constraints, all of those things that you can find to help make that actually useful for your team. And then we have like immersive design listed here. That just means that you're conducting interviews that includes all of the stakeholders, your operations and maintenance staff, the operators who actually use the facility, and that you're taking into consideration all of their needs so that you're creating a holistic design that's actually going to be effective. And in the scoping stage, you can identify the design criteria, the regulations you need to meet, what features you'd like to have in terms of like architecture, determine what that initial schematic drawing, that design is going to be, what it would look like, develop even a safety and security management plan. That's something that is required through FTA. And so if you have federal funding, that's something that you would need to do at that stage. You can also update your project management plan and also update the budget that you're expecting, your estimate, the schedules, and the risks that you have based on this preliminary evaluation of your scope.
All right, project design. The next step in the project development is the design. And we also call that a lot of things: preliminary engineering, engineering phase, whether the survey mapping, geotechnical investigations, you get your architect and engineer on board and they get started. So the FTA actually references a sufficient level of engineering and design, whether it's prior to the completion of NEPA, concurrently with completion of NEPA, or your environmental reviews, and making sure that you have all of your resources along every step of the way. It's typically broken up into 30, 60, 90, and 100% stages. If you have a smaller project, some of those steps you can skip. We recommend that around the 30% mark, you do have a value engineering workshop. Some projects require them, but all projects should have at least a value engineering workshop to make sure that the solution that's in design is aligned with the goals of the project and meets the needs. Value engineering is not about saving money. Value engineering is making sure that the scope of your project meets your needs. You start at the beginning, you start thinking about safety in your operations, making sure that facility meets all of those requirements is really value engineering. Make sure that you perform design and constructability reviews at each stage. On those projects where DRPT is providing oversight, either Bethel or I or one of our partners are going to be there to review the design and constructability reviews. We've also begun developing templates for design checklists and constructability reviews at each stage, and we'll have those for you as resources. Make sure you have all your permits covered. If you're not an element of the locality, you need to begin coordinating with your locality to determine who is going to get the erosion sediment control permits, who is responsible for the building permits, and what may be specific to you. So making sure your permitting is covered, and certainly your third-party agreements, whether it's the cable guy or your power utility, making sure they're aware early at this stage that you have a project coming. Continuity of operations during construction, referencing your operators and engaging them to make sure that the buses can navigate through the construction work zone safely through all phases of construction and that you're meeting their needs is important. And like Bethel noted in the previous slide at scoping, at the design stage, throughout design, update your P&P, your cost estimate, your schedule, and your risk register to make sure that's up to date. All right, next slide. Project development and delivery. The procurement is very different. Once you complete your design, the procurement is going to be very different based on who you are and where you are. So I'm not going to get into a lot of detail. I do want to note that you need to consider your AE is going to be reviewing shop drawings, your architect and engineer during construction. Make sure that if they're not providing construction administration support during construction, if it's not in their scope, that you have someone to do that during this procurement stage. You need to think during the design and make sure that the scope of work for the design, if the architect is not developing your construction documents and your procurement documents, your invitation for bids, your bid documents, that you have a resource for that, that you've got a construction manager there to facilitate it. Don't forget the ICE. The independent cost estimate is critical when you do receive bids as a comparison to make sure that your bids are aligned and they do meet not only the budget for the project, but that they are reasonable. You may have an instance where you have a perfect bid or a very good bid, but it's not aligned with your budget. There also may be an instance where you have a very bad bid and it's within your budget. And you want to make sure that you have an independent cost estimate there to reference your bids against. And that is developed by someone else outside, either your AE and it's evaluated, or DRPT can help you do that. Somebody also needs to be there if your procurement team, if your locality is not evaluating the bid documents for responsiveness to make sure that the contractors have fulfilled their obligation with their bid. You need somebody there to do that. You need a construction manager to review it. All right, Danny. All right, this one. Now I'm going to kick off on this one. For construction, that you've been working so hard to design your project and think about your project and get through your procurement and get your construction manager on board. Now construction is getting started. So get ready. The contractor is going to begin working on site. They're going to mobilize construction trailers, possibly. They're going to mobilize equipment. You're going to see contractor staff around who need access to your facility. They need a security protocol. They need a safe place to work as well. And you need to make sure that your employees are ready for the project. The roles that you and your construction manager, you have a daily job that each of you have to do in a day. Your construction manager is going to be responsible for facilitating communication between you and your contractor. They're going to make sure you're appraised of all needs, the current schedule, the current cost estimate, what the contractor is going to be doing over the next 3 weeks, and so on. Your construction manager is going to make sure that your contractor has a safety plan, not only for their employees, but for yours as well, to make sure that construction goes safely and considers everyone. Even if you have customers that are coming into your facility from the public, every one of them needs to be safe during your construction project. Project control system. I'm a project controls specialist. I love a schedule, which you could tell from the project management plan. Having a management information system to store all of your stuff throughout the life of the project from feasibility to commissioning is critical. And if you don't have a solution to do that, contact us and let us know and we'll help you figure it out. Cost and change control, estimates, progress payments. How are you going to pay the contractor? You need to be thinking about those things before they give you an invoice. Updates and changes. If you do have a delay on your project, heaven forbid you have a delay, you need to make sure that you at least have access to someone who can evaluate a critical path schedule for delays to make sure it's legitimate and you're not getting charged for delays that may be the contractor's responsibility. RFIs, submittals, owner-initiated changes, shop drawings. Your construction manager is going to help you keep up with all of this stuff to make sure that it's processed in a timely manner so that your contractor can keep pushing forward. Your construction manager is going to make sure that the contractor is fulfilling their obligation to all the permitting and environmental requirements, that they're fulfilling their obligation to the project's quality plan, and also monitoring third-party agreements to make sure utilities are relocated, everything's turned on and ready to go when you need it. Commissioning, and Bethel, I'll kick this one off real quick too. Commissioning is something, it's an easy oversight, but making sure that you don't wait until the project is done before you begin to consider, how are my diesel fuel pumps going to get initiated? The HVAC system, it's installed 3 months into a 14-month project for phase 1 of my administration section. Who owns that HVAC unit? Who's going to maintain it during construction? When does the warranty period begin? Those are some things that you really need to think about during the design phase, long before construction starts. Role of the agency. Which agency, if you have contractors, who's going to do what for the commissioning? Is your construction manager going to monitor that and make sure the contractor checks off all those boxes? Or are there elements that you're going to be responsible for? Think about those things early. Again, the owner furnished equipment. I can't stress how important it is for you to have a plan for every single thing that you're supposed to provide that contractor and how it's going to be procured. And you should consider those during design, and your architect engineer should have a list for you for your construction manager to monitor and check the box off. Integrated testing and startup, that is something to where you're going to have certain elements of the project that are under construction. Some things need to be tested. Some things need to be started up so you can go to work tomorrow. And having a plan for that, it might not fall in the contractor's plan, but you certainly incorporate it into your PMP. Making sure that all your operation and manuals are developed before you pay that contractor the last check and know who's responsible for each. If training is included in the scope of the contractor's contract, that work also is performed. Any as-built documentation, not just surveys, but if it is specific information about the solutions that you've got, your geothermal heating system or your water control, everything, your as-built documentation needs to be stored somewhere, and somebody has to be responsible for that. And your warranties. You're going to have a lot of pieces, parts, whether it's fueling, lubricants, HVAC, all of those things are going to have warranties. The warranties are each going to begin at certain times, and you're going to need to keep up with all that stuff. So commissioning, don't wait until the project is close to substantial completion before you begin thinking about commissioning. Make sure that you have a plan for all of those things very early and address it during the design stage.
Do you mind going back a couple of slides? There are some things I wanted to add to what Alan said about construction delivery, specifically the roles. So he talked a little bit about having a construction manager on board. And so I do want to highlight that a little bit, that even for like the simplest projects, you're going to need project staff that are familiar and have expertise and experience with construction management. And so sometimes that's going to mean that your agency will need to retain a consultant to do that work. And so that construction manager, like Alan had mentioned, is going to act as your representative with the contractor and oversee the work that they perform, make sure that it's pursuant to the contract drawings and the specifications. They're going to inspect the work to make sure it's acceptable. They're going to recommend like payment of contractor invoices, and that person is going to be like that resident engineer who's going to be the point of contact with the contractor and be able to be there, like stationed there, perform site visits and all of those sorts of things. And so they can be really critical to help out and support your agency throughout the construction period in ways that you probably won't be able to do because you have other roles and responsibilities within your agency. And then also the design consultant, they're going to be assisting you even beyond just signing and sealing the plans that they've developed. They're also going to be the designer of record, and they're going to continue providing services even in construction. So they can receive and respond to the contractor requests for information, their RFIs. They can review and recommend acceptance of different submittals from the contractor for variations in the drawings or the specifications. They can also review compliance with Buy America provisions of the contract, review change order requests, and also make site visits themselves to ensure design compliance. So they're really valuable. And when you're developing the contracts, when you bring them on board, those are things that you can include for like services that they provide to you. And then another thing, value engineering. Alan had also mentioned this earlier, but I wanted to touch on it again. Value engineering is something that happens in design, and it's very critical in the design stage, but it's also something that happens in construction. And you can communicate with your contractor and encourage them to raise up different value engineering ideas and include incentives in your contracts, like to incorporate those things. And if those changes, if they do bring up a change and it's acceptable, then that's something that can provide a cost saving to your agency and to the contractor. And so there are opportunities also in construction where you can do that. And I wanted to note that also. Thanks, Danny.
All right, lessons learned. This is our last slide. And one of the things that Bethel noted earlier on in the presentation, many of you are developing or have recently completed a construction project, and relying on one another and the lessons learned that you can share between each other is just simply invaluable. Frequently considering your employees' safety and operations early, that certainly is a lesson. You need to get your operators and those who are maintaining your fleet engaged from the very beginning to make sure that the solution meets their needs. Don't just assume that it's going to. Having a plan during construction to operate and maintain your fleet if you're not building a new facility is also critical. Considering where you are working during construction, where are you going to sit? The contractor's renovating your admin facility, where are you going to be? And you need lights and network connectivity, and you need somewhere to store all of your stuff during construction. Who's moving your chair? You can't assume that the contractor is going to be responsible for that when construction starts. You need to have all that done before they get on site. Make sure that you tell IT about your project and that your network connectivity, security is covered. All those things are so critical nowadays. Making sure that that is addressed during construction. Make sure you get your IT folks involved early. Future expansion plans. Are you going to implement vehicle charging solution in the future? Make sure that you consider those things now so that you're not reworking or tearing up fresh concrete pads to install conduits for future EV needs. The storage during construction, whether it's a shipping container or your e-stuff out in the cloud, making sure that you've got a solution for storage during construction is important. Bethel noted engaging your construction manager as early as possible. Don't wait until the design is done to get your CM on board. You may have a project manager engaged at certain parts of the project. Your AE, your architect, may have a project manager. A construction manager will hover in the background from the very beginning through the end of commissioning to make sure each of those things are done. Engaging your third parties and local entities as early as possible. Don't wait until you've got a set of 100% plans to call them up. Get them engaged early. And then after the project's done, you're stuck with it. And now you have to maintain it. So really thinking through what's a pain point for me now and how can I fix that with my future projects? Also an important lesson learned. Bethel, get everything there?
Yep.
Okay.
I think we're in good shape. We can turn it over to questions if anyone has any.
Any questions from the audience? Thank you again, Alan and Bethel, and special guest Grant, obviously, for this fantastic program. And we'll give it a few more seconds, see if anybody has any questions. None in the chat and none in the thing. So thank you again for a fantastic presentation. For everyone who's watching and participating, we will put this up on our YouTube channel as well for future viewing or reviewing if you'd like to watch it again as you're working on your projects and going through the entire process. And we're excited about the next one in June. We have one. Oscar Gonzalez with WSB, terrific presentation. Thank you, Oscar. And thank you for the team again. We look forward to seeing you all again at our conference, and then Bethel and Alan will be presenting our conference, if I remember the program correctly. So they'll be taking their show live on the road. We will be seeing them in person. And as always, if you have any questions for any of the future Lunch and Learns, please send it to us and we'll send it to them in advance so they can dig down into the processes that y'all are all very interested in as you advance your own projects. So thank you all again, and y'all have a great weekend.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Danny.
Thank you.